Beneath the quiet hills of Kentucky, where forests stretch across rolling land and rivers carve their way through limestone valleys, there exists a second world that most people will never see. It is a world of darkness and silence, where passages twist for miles beneath the surface, and where the air remains cool and still, untouched by sunlight for thousands of years. This underground labyrinth, now known as one of the most extensive cave systems on Earth, has drawn explorers, scientists, and adventurers for generations. But what they found was not limited to natural formations or geological wonders. Deep within these caves, far beyond the reach of daylight, explorers uncovered evidence of ancient human presence that should not have been there. Footprints pressed into mud that had not been disturbed for millennia, torches abandoned in narrow passages, and in some cases, carefully placed human remains. Over time, certain discoveries began to raise more unsettling questions. Reports surfaced describing unusually large skeletons, hidden chambers, and burial sites that appeared deliberate rather than accidental. These findings, scattered across decades of exploration, suggest that the caves beneath Kentucky were not simply used for shelter or mining. They may have served a far more complex and mysterious purpose, one that continues to challenge our understanding of the past. The story begins beneath the surface of Mammoth Cave, a place so vast that even after more than 2 centuries of exploration, it continues to expand with every new survey. Formed over millions of years, this immense cave system developed as slightly acidic rainwater filtered through layers of limestone, slowly dissolving the rock and carving out an intricate network of passageways. These processes began when much of the region was submerged beneath an ancient inland sea, leaving behind thick deposits of carbonate rock that would later become the foundation of the cave. Over time, water followed natural fractures, widening them into tunnels that would eventually stretch for hundreds of miles. By the early 20th century, surveyors began to understand that Mammoth Cave was not just large, but possibly endless in scale. Even today, new corridors are discovered, reinforcing the idea that what has been mapped represents only a fraction of what truly exists underground. Long before modern mapping efforts began, the cave had already been explored by indigenous peoples who lived in the region thousands of years ago. Evidence of their presence is not limited to surface artifacts or shallow chambers. Instead, it extends deep into the cave, far beyond the reach of natural light. On the 12th of May 1972, archaeologist Patty Jo Watson and her research team conducted a detailed survey within a remote section of the cave, where they identified fragments of ancient torches, alongside human footprints preserved in hardened mud. Radiocarbon analysis later dated some of these materials to approximately circa 3000 BCE, indicating that humans had been navigating these dark passages more than 5,000 years ago. The torches, constructed from bundles of river cane filled with resin, provided a steady but limited source of light, suggesting that those who entered the cave did so with preparation and intent. What makes these discoveries particularly striking is the level of familiarity these early explorers appeared to have with the cave environment. The footprints identified by Watson's team were not scattered or erratic. They followed clear paths, often moving in consistent directions, as though the individuals who left them understood where they were going. In some cases, multiple sets of footprints overlapped, indicating repeated use of the same routes over extended periods of time. This suggests that knowledge of the cave system was passed down through generations, allowing individuals to travel deeper and with greater confidence than would otherwise be expected in such an environment. Further evidence of organized activity emerged on the 3rd of August 1981, when a collaborative research effort between the University of Kentucky and the National Park Service uncovered tools used for mineral extraction in sections of the cave located far from any entrance. These tools, made from shell and stone, were used to scrape gypsum and other minerals from the cave walls. The presence of these materials indicates that the cave was not only explored, but actively utilized as a resource site. However, the locations of these mining areas raise important questions. Many were situated in narrow or difficult-to-access passages, requiring careful navigation and repeated travel. The deeper these investigations went, the more it became clear that the cave was not simply a place people stumbled into. It was a known and integrated part of the landscape. Routes were followed, chambers were revisited, and activities were carried out with a level of consistency that suggests planning and purpose. The cave, in many ways, functioned as an extension of the surface world, a hidden environment that held both practical and possibly symbolic value. But among the evidence of mining, exploration, and repeated travel, another pattern began to emerge. In certain chambers, often located far from primary pathways, researchers began to encounter signs that pointed towards something else entirely. They were not just entering the cave to gather resources. They were bringing something with them. And in some cases, they were leaving it behind. On the 19th of October 1811, during an active period of saltpeter mining inside Mammoth Cave, a group of workers made a discovery that would fundamentally change how the cave was understood. At the time, saltpeter was being extracted in large quantities for use in gunpowder, and miners were constantly digging through sediment in search of mineral-rich deposits. While working in a narrow passage deep within the cave, one of the laborers struck an object that did not resemble stone or mineral. As the surrounding material was carefully cleared away, the shape of a human form began to appear. What they uncovered was not a scattered skeleton or fragmentary remains. It was a partially preserved human body, its features still recognizable despite the passage of time. The dry and stable conditions within the cave had naturally mummified the remains, preserving skin, posture, and even traces of wrapping material. 2 days later, on the 21st of October 1811, local physician Dr. Samuel Brown was brought into the cave to examine the find. His observations noted that the body appeared to have been intentionally placed, positioned in a way that suggested deliberate burial rather than accidental death. This discovery was not an isolated event. As mining operations expanded during the War of 1812, more artifacts and human remains were uncovered. On the 7th of March 1813, workers in another section of the cave reported finding woven sandals, torch fragments, and additional skeletal remains located in areas far removed from the cave's entrance. These items were often found together, forming small clusters that suggested they had been left as part of a specific activity rather than lost or discarded randomly. The deeper miners went, the more evidence they encountered that the cave had once been used extensively by earlier populations. These were not brief visits or isolated incidents. The presence of tools, personal items, and human remains indicated sustained use over long periods of time. In some cases, the arrangement of objects suggested that certain chambers may have held particular significance, possibly serving as designated areas for specific purposes. By the 1830s, exploration of the cave had expanded beyond mining, attracting individuals interested in mapping and documenting its vast interior. Among the most notable figures of this period was Stephen Bishop, an enslaved guide whose knowledge of the cave would become legendary. On the 12th of April 1838, Bishop led a group into previously unexplored sections, carefully mapping passageways and identifying new chambers. His work revealed that the cave extended far beyond what had previously been known, opening the door to further exploration. Bishop's accounts included references to areas where artifacts had been left undisturbed for extended periods, suggesting that portions of the cave had remained untouched since ancient times. While not all of his observations were formally recorded, later expeditions confirmed many of the locations he described, reinforcing his reputation as one of the most skilled early explorers of the cave system. These discoveries established a clear pattern. The cave was not simply a place where individuals became lost or trapped. It was a location that had been intentionally entered, used, and in certain cases, chosen as a place to leave the dead. And as exploration continued, the nature of those burials became more difficult to explain. By the late 19th century, Kentucky had entered a period defined by intense interest in cave exploration, driven by both scientific curiosity and the potential for economic gain. Landowners began to recognize that caves could attract visitors, and in some cases generate significant income through tourism. This realization led to a wave of exploration across the region, as individuals searched for new entrances and previously undiscovered systems that could be developed and promoted. One of the most determined explorers of this era was Floyd Collins, born on the 20th of July, 1887. Collins spent much of his life searching for caves, often relying on subtle environmental clues such as cool air currents rising from the ground or slight depressions in the landscape that might indicate an opening below. On the 18th of September 1917, after weeks of searching, he discovered what would later be known as Great Crystal Cave. The find was significant, not only for its natural formations, but for its potential to attract visitors and generate income. Earlier discoveries had already demonstrated how easily caves could remain hidden beneath ordinary terrain. On the 14th of July 1859, a worker on land owned by Jesse Coates noticed a small opening in a valley floor. The following day, the 15th of July 1859, a group of local explorers entered the opening and discovered what would later be called Diamond Caverns. Inside, they found extensive chambers filled with mineral formations that had remained undisturbed for thousands of years, indicating that entire cave systems could exist just beneath the surface, hidden from view. Exploration continued into the early 20th century. On the 6th of June 1915, explorer Edmund Turner convinced a landowner to allow excavation at a site he believed concealed a cave entrance. After days of digging, the team broke through into a previously unknown system, later named Great Onyx Cave. These discoveries reinforced the idea that the landscape of Kentucky was layered with hidden spaces, many of which had never been accessed in modern times. However, as more caves were opened and explored, a consistent pattern began to emerge. In certain chambers, often located far from main pathways, explorers encountered signs of human activity that predated their own presence. Tools, markings, and in some cases, human remains were found in locations that required deliberate effort to reach. These were not areas that could be easily stumbled upon. They required knowledge, preparation, and intention. This raised an important question. If modern explorers were only just discovering these spaces, how had ancient individuals managed to reach them thousands of years earlier? And perhaps more importantly, why had they gone there at all? As exploration intensified across Kentucky during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a different kind of story began to circulate alongside documented archaeological findings. These were not formal reports published in academic journals, but accounts appearing in regional newspapers, personal journals, and local testimonies. They described discoveries that seemed unusual, sometimes even implausible. Among the most persistent of these were claims of unusually large human skeletons found within caves or in nearby burial sites. On the 9th of November 1895, a brief but widely discussed report published in the Louisville Courier-Journal described laborers uncovering skeletal remains during land-clearing operations in western Kentucky. According to the article, the bones appeared longer and thicker than expected, suggesting an individual of exceptional size. While the report did not include precise measurements or scientific verification, it contributed to a growing pattern of similar claims emerging from the region. These accounts became more detailed in the early 20th century. On the 3rd of May 1912, near a cave entrance in Hart County, a small excavation, led by W.H. Thomas, reportedly uncovered a burial containing skeletal remains that appeared unusually robust. In his written notes, Thomas described the bones as larger than those typically observed in known Native American burials, with a femur that seemed proportionally longer than average. However, like many discoveries of the time, the remains were not preserved under controlled conditions. They were examined briefly, discussed among local observers, and eventually reburied without formal documentation. This lack of systematic study would become a recurring issue, making it difficult for modern researchers to verify or fully understand these early findings. It is important to approach these reports with careful consideration. Variations in human size have always existed, and certain individuals or populations may have been taller due to genetic or environmental factors. Additionally, early observers often lacked the tools and training needed to accurately measure or interpret skeletal remains. In some cases, bones from multiple individuals could have been mistakenly assembled, creating the illusion of a single, unusually large skeleton. Environmental factors such as soil pressure or shifting sediments could also alter the positioning of remains, leading to exaggerated impressions of size. Yet despite these reasonable explanations, the consistency of such reports across different locations and time periods remains notable. Many of these accounts are specifically associated with caves or areas near cave systems, rather than open surface burials. This pattern suggests that the environment itself may have played a role in how remains were preserved or perceived. Caves, with their stable temperatures and protective conditions, can preserve organic material far better than surface environments, potentially leading to discoveries that appear more intact and therefore more striking. Another possibility lies in cultural interpretation. In many traditions, individuals of importance are remembered as larger than life, both figuratively and sometimes literally in oral histories. It is possible that certain burials were associated with individuals of high status, whose physical characteristics or symbolic importance became emphasized over time. When early settlers or explorers encountered these remains, their interpretations may have been influenced by expectation, speculation, or even the desire to report something extraordinary. In the absence of preserved evidence and consistent documentation, the idea of giant skeletons remains unconfirmed. However, the persistence of these accounts, combined with the unique conditions of cave environments, ensures that the topic continues to attract attention. Whether rooted in misinterpretation, natural variation, or something not yet fully understood, these reports form part of a broader pattern of discoveries that make the caves of Kentucky more complex than they first appear. Among the most compelling pieces of evidence found within Kentucky's cave systems are the preserved footprints left behind by ancient explorers. Unlike tools or artifacts that can be moved or altered, footprints represent a direct and immediate record of human presence. They capture a moment in time, preserved exactly as it occurred, offering a rare glimpse into the actions of individuals who lived thousands of years ago. On the 21st of August 1979, during a detailed survey within a remote section of Mammoth Cave, archaeologist Patty Jo Watson and her team identified a sequence of footprints embedded in a stretch of hardened mud. These impressions varied in size and depth, indicating that multiple individuals had passed through the area. Radiocarbon dating of nearby torch fragments placed these footprints at approximately circa 3000 BCE, suggesting that they were left more than 5,000 years ago. What makes this discovery particularly significant is not just the age of the footprints, but their location. The passage in which they were found lies far from any natural entrance, requiring careful navigation, even with modern equipment. Reaching this area involves moving through narrow corridors, uneven terrain, and sections of complete darkness, where visibility is entirely dependent on artificial light. Closer analysis of the footprints revealed additional details that provide insight into the behavior of those who left them. Some prints showed clear toe impressions, indicating that individuals were walking barefoot rather than wearing protective coverings. Others appeared alongside faint drag marks, suggesting that objects may have been carried or pulled along the ground. In certain areas, overlapping prints indicated repeated travel along the same route, possibly over an extended period of time. This was not a single journey into the cave. It was a path that had been used again and again. The presence of smaller footprints alongside larger ones suggests that groups entering the cave may have included individuals of different ages. This challenges the idea that cave exploration was limited to a small group of specialized individuals. Instead, it may have been a broader activity involving multiple members of a community. The reasons for these journeys remain uncertain, but the consistency of the evidence suggests that they were purposeful rather than accidental. What remains most difficult to explain is the motivation behind such deep exploration. The cave environment offers no obvious advantages in terms of food or shelter, and the risks associated with navigating dark, confined spaces are significant. Yet these individuals repeatedly entered the cave, traveling far beyond the reach of natural light. They carried torches, followed established routes, and left behind traces of their presence that would remain undisturbed for thousands of years. In some sections of the cave, the footprints simply disappear, fading as the ground changes from soft mud to solid rock. These abrupt endings leave questions unanswered. They mark the limits of what can be observed, beyond which the path continues without visible trace. What lies beyond those points remains unknown, hidden within areas that have yet to be fully explored or understood. As researchers continued to examine the growing body of evidence, a new perspective began to take shape regarding the role of caves in ancient societies. These spaces were not simply used for practical purposes such as mining or exploration. Instead, they appear to have held a deeper significance, possibly serving as locations for ritual, ceremony, or symbolic activity. On the 11th of June 1983, a detailed investigation conducted by archaeologists from the National Park Service documented a chamber within Mammoth Cave that contained a combination of mining debris and carefully arranged artifacts. Among the items recovered were woven sandals, fragments of torches, and small containers that may have been used to transport materials. The arrangement of these objects suggested intentional placement rather than random loss. Some items were grouped together in patterns that implied repeated use of the same location over time. In one section of the chamber, torch remnants appeared to have been placed in a specific configuration, though the meaning of this arrangement remains unclear. These findings indicate that the cave was not only a place of activity, but a space where actions were performed with purpose and possibly symbolic intent. Anthropological studies of other cultures have shown that caves are often associated with spiritual or transitional concepts. In many traditions, underground spaces are viewed as connections to the underworld, the realm of ancestors, or the origin of life itself. Entering a cave can be seen as a symbolic journey, representing movement between different states of existence. If similar beliefs were held by the ancient inhabitants of Kentucky, then the use of caves for burial and ritual takes on a different meaning. This interpretation is supported by the presence of human remains found deep within the cave system. Transporting a body into such an environment would have required effort, coordination, and intention. It is unlikely that these burials were carried out for convenience. Instead, they suggest that the location itself held significance. The act of placing the dead within the cave may have been part of a broader belief system, one that connected the physical world with something beyond it. Additional evidence of symbolic activity can be found in markings left on cave walls. On the 2nd of September 1987, a research team documented faint pictographs, created using charcoal or mineral pigments. While the designs are simple and their meanings uncertain, their presence indicates that the cave was used as a space for expression and communication. These markings, combined with the arrangement of artifacts and the placement of human remains, suggest that the cave functioned as more than a physical environment. It was a space shaped by human intention, carrying meaning that extended beyond its natural form. Taken together, these findings point toward a complex relationship between people and the underground world. The caves were not empty voids, but places where physical actions and symbolic meanings intersected. They were entered with purpose, used in ways that reflected cultural beliefs, and in some cases, chosen as final resting places for the dead. Despite more than 2 centuries of exploration, the cave systems beneath Kentucky remain only partially understood. New discoveries continue to reshape what is known about their size, structure, and history. On the 15th of January 1981, a team of explorers began mapping what would later become known as the Fisher Ridge Cave System. Over time, they documented more than 100 miles of interconnected passages, many of which showed no evidence of prior modern exploration. These findings confirm that large portions of the underground landscape remain hidden, waiting to be discovered. As explorers move deeper into these systems, they continue to encounter familiar patterns: ancient torch fragments, preserved footprints, and occasional human remains provide evidence of past activity that extends far beyond what might be expected. In some cases, chambers appear to have been sealed by natural formations, isolating them from the rest of the cave for centuries or longer. These sealed environments offer rare opportunities to study conditions that have remained unchanged since ancient times. Accessing these areas, however, is not without risk. Many passages are narrow, unstable, or partially flooded, requiring specialized equipment and careful planning to navigate safely. Even with modern technology, exploration can be slow and dangerous. This reality highlights the challenges faced by ancient individuals who entered these same spaces with limited tools and light. Their ability to navigate such environments suggests a level of knowledge and experience that is difficult to fully reconstruct. The deeper one travels into the cave, the more the environment changes. Sound becomes muted, light disappears entirely, and the sense of direction becomes increasingly difficult to maintain. In this setting, even small discoveries take on greater significance. A single footprint or fragment of a torch can provide valuable insight into how these spaces were used in the past. Yet, for every passage that is mapped, others remain unexplored. The cave continues to extend into unknown areas, suggesting that there are still sections that have never been seen in modern times. These hidden spaces may contain further evidence of ancient activity, or they may remain empty, preserving only the silence that has existed there for thousands of years. Beyond the mapped routes and documented corridors, there are parts of the cave system that remain closed off from exploration, not by lack of interest, but by physical barriers that have proven difficult to overcome. These include collapsed passages, sediment-filled tunnels, and narrow openings that extend just far enough to suggest continuation before becoming impassable. On the 9th of April 1994, a survey team working within a remote extension of Mammoth Cave identified a section where a steady flow of cool air could be felt emerging from a crack in the rock. This airflow indicated that a larger chamber likely existed beyond the obstruction, as air pressure differences typically require open space to circulate. Despite careful attempts to widen the passage, the instability of the surrounding rock made further excavation too dangerous to continue. These sealed areas are significant because they represent environments that may have remained untouched for thousands of years. Unlike more accessible sections of the cave, which have been visited repeatedly by both ancient and modern explorers, these chambers could preserve evidence in its original state. If ancient individuals once entered these areas before they became sealed, any artifacts, footprints, or remains left behind may still exist exactly as they were placed. This possibility has drawn the attention of researchers who view such spaces as rare opportunities to study undisturbed archaeological contexts. However, accessing these chambers presents both technical and ethical challenges. Modern excavation methods can risk damaging fragile cave formations or disturbing environments that have remained stable for millennia. In addition, there is the question of preservation. Opening a sealed chamber can introduce changes in temperature, humidity, and airflow that may alter or degrade whatever lies inside. For this reason, many of these areas are left undisturbed, their contents unknown and protected by the very barriers that prevent entry. The existence of these sealed passages adds another layer to the mystery of the cave system. They suggest that what has already been discovered may only represent a portion of the full story. Beyond these barriers could be additional evidence of ancient activity, including burial sites or ritual spaces that have never been documented. Until technology or conditions allow for safe exploration, these hidden chambers remain one of the most intriguing aspects of Kentucky's underground world. As the study of Kentucky's caves continues, researchers are left not only with physical evidence, but with patterns that suggest a deeper and more complex history. The repeated presence of footprints, tools, and human remains in distant sections of the cave indicates that these spaces were used with intention over long periods of time. This was not random exploration. It was a practice, one that required knowledge, preparation, and a willingness to enter environments that most would avoid. The reasons behind these actions are not fully understood, but the consistency of the evidence suggests that they were part of a broader cultural framework. On the 14th of October 2003, a multidisciplinary team studying cave usage patterns compiled data from multiple sites within the region, including Mammoth Cave and surrounding systems. Their findings showed that areas with the highest concentration of artifacts were often located at transitional points within the cave, such as junctions between major passages or entrances to deeper chambers. These locations may have held particular significance, serving as points where different activities intersected. In some cases, the placement of objects appeared deliberate, as though marking a boundary or indicating a specific purpose associated with that space. What remains most striking is the persistence of human presence in environments that offer no immediate practical benefit. The caves do not provide food, sunlight, or comfort. Yet individuals repeatedly entered them, traveling further into darkness than necessary for simple resource gathering. This suggests that their actions were guided by beliefs or traditions that gave meaning to these journeys. Whether those beliefs were spiritual, ceremonial, or symbolic, they reflect a way of understanding the world that is difficult to reconstruct from physical evidence alone. The caves preserve only fragments of these activities. A footprint here, a tool there, a set of remains placed deep within a chamber. Together, these fragments form a record that is incomplete but compelling. They point toward a relationship between people and the underground world that extends beyond survival or convenience. It is a relationship defined by purpose, shaped by tradition, and preserved in silence. And as long as parts of this underground system remain unexplored, that silence continues to hold answers that have yet to be revealed. The caves beneath Kentucky are more than natural formations. They are records of human activity, preserved in darkness and protected from the passage of time. From the earliest explorers who entered these spaces thousands of years ago to the modern teams who continue to map their depths, the story of these caves is one of persistence, curiosity, and discovery. The idea of giant tombs remains uncertain, shaped by a mixture of documented findings and unverified accounts. While some reports may be the result of misinterpretation or exaggeration, they reflect a broader pattern of unusual discoveries associated with cave environments. What is clear is that these caves were used intentionally. People entered them, traveled deep within their passages, and in some cases, chose them as places of burial. This behavior suggests that the caves held meaning beyond their physical form, whether used for ritual, protection, or symbolic purposes. They were part of a larger cultural landscape that connected the surface world with the spaces below. The act of bringing the dead into such environments indicates a belief system that valued these locations in ways that are not yet fully understood. Even today, much of this underground world remains unexplored. New passages continue to be discovered, and with each new finding, the history of the caves becomes more complex. The silence within these spaces is not emptiness, but preservation. It holds traces of journeys taken long ago, of actions carried out in darkness, and of individuals whose stories have yet to be fully uncovered. And as exploration continues, one question remains: how much of this hidden world is still waiting to be found?